Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Ecclesiastes 5 and 6. And I'm down here at Murley Point in Cape Town, the hustle and bustle of the city behind me, but reflecting on these chapters as I stand here on the beach. Now, the macro issues that we confronted with in life, like the interest rate and crime and corruption and political policies, they all have a bearing on us, don't they? Sometimes make us feel helpless. Now, Solomon, as he's reflecting on these big issues, basically has this idea. Your approach to God is going to shape your approach to life. He says this in Ecclesiastes 5:1. Guard your steps as you go to the house of God. He said, rather approach him with obedience than offer sacrifices as fools do. So in other words, rather consider your approach to God, your obedience to God, rather than all the religious mumbo-jumbo. He says, don't be too hasty to speak to God. For many dreams bring futility, so many words. Therefore, fear God. He's basically saying that the fear of God determines how you approach the rest of the fearful issues that are involved in the world. And the fear of God, he's not talking about terror, like wanting to run from God. You know, the picture I always have when I think of the fear of God is the way that a child will approach the school principal if that school principal was their dad. Think about that. Your dad has authority, you're a member of the school, but you're able to come into his presence because he's your dad, but he still has this authority. That's the type of picture that we get. He goes on to say in verse 8, you should not be surprised at corruption. Verse 8, if you see oppressors of the poor and perversion of justice and righteousness in the province, don't be astonished at the situation. That's what a godless world looks like. He says you should not be surprised about the headaches that attach to work and money. Verse 11, when good things increase, the one who consumes them multiply. What then is it profit to the owner except to gaze on them with his eyes? He says actually you can make a lot of money, but don't be surprised if your problems don't go away. He's basically saying the fear of God helps us navigate these issues and the macro issues of life. So the New Testament speaks about the fear of God quite a lot. Verse 2 of Philippians says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. 1 Corinthians 2 says, and I come to you with weakness and fear and trembling. Remember in Acts 19, when the sons of Sceva tried to cast out the demon, but they couldn't, fear fell upon the entire region. This is what it says. And Ephesians 5 says, submit to one another out of reverence, out of fear to the Lord. And so basically he's saying, as we approach God, not with many words, not with lots of religious mumbo-jumbo, but as we approach God with fear and reverence, perspective is found, and we can handle corruption, we can handle the macro issues of this world, because we know that our God is like the headmaster presiding over everything. Our God is like in charge, presiding over everything, and we can come to him. Ecclesiastes 6 has got a slightly different tack. He's basically saying, what is useful under the sun? What's life use under the sun? That's a phrase he uses, life under the sun. And he's basically pushing us to understand that there's more than life under the sun. Here is the tragedy I've observed under the sun, he says. It weighs heavily on mankind. And he basically says, it doesn't matter how rich you are, life under the sun seems meaningless. And then he says, and then the grave comes, and the grave mocks us. That also, life under the sun seems meaningless. A stillborn child, though it does not see the sun, is not conscious. And then it has more rest than he. He's basically saying, life under the sun seems even more futile than a stillborn child. He goes through from verse 5. Rich and poor, what's the difference? Happy and unhappy, what's the difference? Strong and weak, what's the difference? Lots of words, few words, what's the difference? For who knows, verse 12 says, what is it good that anyone in life has the few days of this useful life? They're like a shadow, he says. Who can tell anyone what will happen under the sun after him? He's pushing us to this understanding. There is more than simply life under the sun. God exists beyond the sun. And basically, what the New Testament teaches us, John says, the one who's beyond the sun comes to us under the sun. That's Jesus incarnate. And so he brings meaning. He brings meaning to work, meaning to love, meaning to life. The one who's beyond the sun comes to us under the sun. That's what it says in John 1. In the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. He was in the beginning. Through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and in life the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The gospel message is true. Life under the sun seems meaningless, but the one who's beyond the sun, which is Jesus, has come under the sun, and he gives us meaning as we live out our life in this crazy world.